We had no meeting last month, and we've had a few things occur. The first is, of course, the great debate, and I'm being somewhat sarcastic, about stand your ground. We have had a stand your ground law here in Florida, as some other states do as well. And there's been much discussion about that, mainly by Democrats. The only thing that Republicans have said about stand your ground was no. The Speaker said they'd allow it. The person who chairs our committee said he wouldn't change a word of stand your ground. I believe that the special session doesn't exist. And there's been great debate, not only nationally, obviously, on all the cable TV stations about Florida and other places, but on what it really means. And what stand your ground is, basically, that someone should, and of course does not have in Florida, the question of a duty to retreat. The duty to say, I can back off this situation, I don't have the right to just pursue someone and you know, irrespective of the consequences. We even had a recent article the other day that ties in directly into our guest speaker tonight, with Florida Sheriff's Association said they did not agree to change anything or repeal in its entirety stand your ground. And it was a motion that they said passed unanimously. If you read the paper, you saw that our Sheriff Israel said, I would not have supported that motion. I think there needs to be changes, and he may address that later. And then was forced a correction to the Florida Sheriff's Association saying, that's not where I stand. I simply wasn't at that meeting of that vote. So Democrats are standing up for what they believe. And all this does is highlight, again, the significant differences between Democrats and Republicans. Which brings us to the next event. Our favorite point of discussion, Rick Scott. And now that the Supreme Court, which also has occurred, has decided that some of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is no longer viable, what that does is it now takes out of the hands of the Justice Department, in Florida specifically, the right of pre-approval in 5 counties where there had been abuses, voting rights abuses. Which is certainly most significant as we're now coming up on the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's speech, his great dream speech in 1963. But what they've done is, by striking that down, they have now opened and provided negative opportunity for more gamesmanship by this Republican governor and this Republican legislature in Florida. In fact, in the last week, because we've all lived through it, there was a negative contest, you may know about, you may not, between Florida and North Carolina, which is imposing some of the most severe, inappropriate, and probably unconstitutional restrictions on people's ability to vote. And I'm sure you're not shocked to know that it disproportionately hurts people that might tend to vote Democratic. I know that's shocking. And yet there was a national discussion on it. And we in Florida like to be number one, even if it's for the wrong things, we just want to be number one. So we actually beat out by a bunch of pundits sitting around on cable news one night that we were so bad in Florida that we even beat out North Carolina. And the tipping point was, I still remember it, was that the pundits agreed the reason we won was because even North Carolina did not want to drug test public assistance recipients. So we won based on that incredibly negative thing, which of course, as we know, thank you Rick Scott, was ruled by the courts as unconstitutional almost immediately as predicted. So this is not only about bad behavior, but this is about continued bad behavior, not to serve people, but to serve a very, very narrow political base by this Republican governor. That's what it's about. We got to make sure that we retire Rick Scott and send him back to wherever he